Spencer?
Good morning, Mr. Ed.
How's it going?
Hi, Susan. How are you doing, guys?
Morning.
Morning.
Spencer, I want us to talk about this issue about Kata and government. You know, there has been some sort of a face-off. We have observed for some time now the emergence of what seems to be growing into a serious standoff between, Bakata tribal leaders and the country's political leadership. This all started, of course, I think following Kgafela's, inauguration or installation, where he opted to not to be in the government payroll because he didn't want to be subjected to government control. There has been a series of events following that, of course, the illegal floggings, the case, the Mascom Tower. He has come out to criticize the constitution of the country, the legal system. We know that they have indicated that cabinet ministers and President Ian Khama are not welcome to address quota meetings in Gauteng. Lately, during the launch of the Vision 2016 Awareness Month, he came out and said, which came out to sound like he was threatening of, possibility of a civil war. And the question is, there has been a series of events. Are we not, in a slumber here? Where is this going? Are we not going to wake up one day and say, you know what, we saw this coming? Is this not a time bomb? That's what I'm asking this morning. In your view, what is driving this dispute between government and the Bakada tribal leadership?
Yeah, Mr. Ed. I think you are right. The relationship between Kgosi Kgafela and government has basically deteriorated, I think, to an extent where now I think it will negatively affect the development in Gauteng. And I don't think that is what he wants to achieve. He started all this, I think, immediately after his coronation, as you said. To many of us, we thought it was something like a cultural renaissance where he brought back Bobo Khwera, Bojale, and all other good things that used to happen in Gauteng. But along the way, I think he lost the plot somewhat. And he's now in a position where he has opened too many battlefronts for himself. I'm not very sure he will win all the battles. And then that kind of exposes him, because there's also a possibility of him in the future going to jail, given the cases that he's having to answer to. So the situation is difficult ultimately for him. I think when you talk to Kgosi Kgafela, he really longs for those days when the Kgosi, like him and his predecessors and his ancestors, were really calling the shots. But I'm not very sure that is what many Botswana across the country would want to. I mean, he wants to basically control land. And those were the things that happened when there were no things like land board. And the like, people would basically have their cattle belonging to the chief, I think. So I don't think that is what people want at the moment. But I worry for him because, like I said, he has exposed himself ultimately. This is a government that is really powerful, and people who call the shots just happen to be politicians. What he should have done was to try to carve a meaningful role for himself within this very complex political situation.
Does he have a point in his wishes and desires to have maybe the Kgosi hold more power as it used to be as compared to the political leadership of today?
Let's not make. I mean, maybe we run the risk of mixing issues. Botswana still like and respect their Kgosi, but I don't think they are clamoring for eras of kingdoms where kings basically were running roughshod over everybody else. I don't think they would want to substitute political leadership for the Kgosi at the moment. But that is not to say they don't like their Kgosi. They would respect them, I think, to the end, but not to give them the powers that the Kgosi used to enjoy.
Spencer, I'm also wondering whether this is not a personality mismatch between Kgosi Kgafela and possibly President Ian Khama as the leader of the country.
Yeah, which is very ironic given that the two guys are, both of them, Kgosi in a way. And you would believe that in the past, the Kgosi used to really go on well, they were very close. It could be but why this time around we have two people who, both of them have blue blood in them, fighting each other like that is very strange. I don't have an answer to that, Mr. Ed. You would imagine that it would be much easier for Kgafela to relate to Kgosi like Kama rather than him relating to Merafi or to Mohai. But that is not the case at the moment.
But Spencer, when you look at the whole issue, who's faulting who here between the political leadership system and Bakata tribal leaders?
Very clearly, Kgafela faults the political leadership. He says the country has gone astray. He wants to take the country back to where he says it belongs, and he wants to start that by taking back Bakata first, and then ultimately his current plan would roll out to other areas like Hamangwa, Dobangwa, Kgosi, Valete, and the like. That is his grand plan, because he says even the constitution, he does not respect it because it was not done properly. He says he has proof of it that there were not proper consultations. In fact, his forefathers were not consulted when the constitution came about. His tribe specifically was not consulted. So he has all sorts of complaints, grievances. But like I said, I think that the technical mistake that he made was to allow himself to open so many battlegrounds. He should have taken issues one by one, rather than opening himself to so many issues all at once, where he now risks even going to jail. And that will basically delay his plan, as it were.
Are Kgafela's sentiments shared by the rest of the tribal leadership?
It would be very difficult to say all Bakata would necessarily believe what he says, but they respect him. He should not make a mistake of that kind of respect to necessarily translate into them agreeing with his plan. They like him because they honestly believe, and rightly so, that he is the heir to the throne. But that does not mean that they want the plan where he will become an overlord like his ancestors used to be maybe more than 100 years ago.
Spencer, recently during the launch of the Vision 2016 Awareness Month, what did you read into that? What did you read into that? But does he have the capacity to take head on this government militarily? I don't think so. I don't think he really meant it. He was just being hyperbolic in a way. He knows very well that he does not have the police to match the states. He does not have the military to match the states. All he can do is to count on the goodwill of his people. But also, if these cases continue for long, there is a risk that people will get fatigued and also start to leave him alone, and then he'll find himself really exposed. His people will not come along, especially when he goes to jail. He will be in jail alone. Some people think, or maybe he wants to create his own kingdom, cutting into his own kingdom of some sort, like Swaziland. What do you think about that?
Yeah, he speaks very highly of the Swati kingdom. In fact, he always he looks at it as the model, ultimately, of where the real place of a king has really been allowed to flourish. Of course, here and there he'll say he'll differ with King Swati, but ultimately that is his model. But do Botswana really want to have maybe 20 little kingdoms dividing their country? I don't think so. Because if he becomes a king in his own area, somebody at Hamangwat will also want to be the same. Somebody Kobokalaga will also want to be the same. Koha, Tawana, and the like. But I don't think that is where the direction of this country today. We have gone too far to go back to those days, Mr. Ed.
But do you think he has the support of Bakata in general? In his desires?
He only has the support of Bakata in as far as he's their Kgosi, but not in the way that he really wants to mold this direction. One other thing that he's really failed to do is to enroll the support of other Kgosis like him, because he's not the only Kgosi in this country. There are many others. I think what he should have done was to start first by really getting the support of the 8 or so we learn people like him, and then really make sure they were behind him. But that has not been the case. You see, some of them are enjoying salaries, double D4 and the like, government, which he has really turned his back against. But that, like I said, has exposed him. He's all in it alone.
How do you see this face-off, going forward in the future? How do you see this face-off turning out?
Ultimately, I think Kgosi Kgafela, if he does not reduce and become more tactful, especially these battlefronts, he will lose. Like I said, the real risk, and I fear for him here, is that he will go to jail, and then his credibility will be undermined. Many of his people will start complaining. They will start by doing so behind the scenes and ultimately go public and say he's delaying the developments that they all want in the country.
And I know, Spencer, you said, he doesn't have the capacity to take government head on, even though he has warned of, the possibility of a civil war. But should Botswana begin to worry, right? And all that, but we don't know what they're capable of, But should Botswana begin to worry about this issue?
No, we should never worry about a civil war, Mr. That is just overstretching the whole thing. Those people, those are cultural regiments. They have nothing to do with the military background. They have nothing to do with waging wars. They would not stand even for a second against the Botswana Defense Force or against the SSG. Those are just people with sticks. They don't have guns. I think for him to say there will be bloodshed, maybe he means whipping the people at the court and not a civil war.
That's what the Boers,
in other countries.
That's what the Boers were meant to believe during Kgosi.
But they didn't have a chance. I mean, even in the modern South Africa,
yes.
They just wanted a false start. But ultimately, when they were called to come for it, they didn't come in numbers. That is what is likely to happen to him. I think he must try to strive to carve a meaningful role for himself inside this modern political Botswana. And there's space for him, I think, especially the way he started. He started so well, but maybe out of excitement or for lack of advice, he went astray somewhere.
And maybe you think he should focus on, cultural revival. Maybe that's one area
yes, because that is his biggest strength. And there he has a lot of support, goodwill amongst his people, but also national. People looked at him here as a young Kgosi Kgolo who was really going out of his way to do the good things that we had left behind as a nation.
All right, Spencer, thanks a lot for your time. We will talk again next week, Monday.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. 7:57, time for the Tech News, proudly brought to you by B Mobile.